morning, pals. Welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Sherelle. I'm an artist, illustrator and drinker of tea. Excuse what looks like just loads of trash going on behind me. It's not. This is organised chaos. And I feel like when you have a creative brain, that's just the way that you work. Or maybe it's just me. Like, I work like a raccoon. Like, this makes total sense to me. Probably not to anyone else, probably just looks like a total mess, but I know what I'm doing, and that's fine. I thought we would do a little Q&A session today. I posted up on my Instagram fairly recently to ask if anybody had any art questions. And I don't claim to be like an art expert. I have no formal training, but I was just kind of curious to see what kinds of questions people might pose to me, especially when those people know the kind of illustration and artwork that I do. I just thought it would be an interesting exercise. So I'm going to go through some of the questions because some of them were so good, and like I wanted to go like really in depth with some of them, which was just too much for Instagram. So here we are. Let's get into the questions. I screenshotted them all so that I wouldn't lose the questions because I know what I'm like. I will log back into Instagram and they will be gone. So, first up, Charlie Lane Draws asked, what is your like standout art piece or collection where you feel like you really leveled up? And it is this piece. And I will tell you for why. It's not because I think it's the best artwork I've ever produced. It's not because it is the most technically correct piece of art I've ever produced, but it is the one where I felt a real shift towards allowing myself to really take advantage of my skill set. That probably sounds silly, but I think a lot of times when I create, I'm up in my head of, is this technically correct? Is this what this would look like in real life? Is this the way that an art teacher would teach you to do it? And this piece especially, I let go of all that. And I just kind of like intuitively painted and looked at it and added a bit more here and a bit more there. And I just kind of, it was a really freeing piece. And I'll be honest, looking at it now, I'm like, I can see things that I could do better. So it's not that I think it's the best piece of artwork that I've ever produced, but it had such an internal, I don't know if emotional is the right word, but it comes with an emotional baggage, which is like a good thing. And I think the reason that I was able to be more fluid and more just intuitively creative with this one is because not long before that, I started playing with gouache. And if you've watched any of my recent vlogs, you'll know that I've kind of been wanting to get into more traditional media, but really struggling with it. And again, I think the reason for that is I'm too much up in my head about it. I just need to like create stuff, see what happens, go with the flow a bit more. But because I've been playing with gouache a little bit more, that really made some things stand out to me. And it's really influenced the way that I do my digital drawings now. Firstly, working with gouache really made me understand contrast a little bit more. I tend to work with an array of colours in 3 tones. My artwork is pretty simplified. It's not super detailed. It's not supposed to be. It's stylised. It's simplified. That's the way I like it. And what I tend to do is come up with a colour palette for a piece which is no more than 5 colours generally. And for each of those colours, there will be 3 tones. There'll be a mid-tone, there'll be a highlight, and there'll be a shadow. And that's the way I like it. I like it nice and simple. But what working with gouache really illustrated to me was that the contrast between those 3 tones can be, or should be, or looks better if it is, much higher. What I mean by that is the value shift. The highlight is lighter, the shadow is darker, the mid-tone remains the same. And that was something that the reason that gouache really highlighted this to me was because gouache does not dry the colour you think it's going to dry. Dark colours dry a little bit lighter and light colours dry a little bit darker. And what that essentially meant for me is that the values come closer together when I was trying to use this kind of simplified 3-tone system that I kind of just seem to have adopted for whatever reason. So what would happen is I would think I had quite a dark colour and it would get a little bit lighter, but I would also think I had quite a light colour and it got a little bit darker. So rather than, if I'm saying the mid-tone is here, rather than my contrast looking like this, it looked like this, which was not contrasty enough. I don't know if I explained that well, but what it meant was I really had to mix my colours differently. I had to do my darks a lot darker than I thought and my lights a lot lighter than I thought, which meant the pieces overall ended up with more contrast. And I was like, I really like this, and I could apply the same logic to my digital paintings. If I create more contrast, pull the colours slightly further apart from one another, then you get more depth. And then from there, what I also had done in some of my gouache paintings was to blend them more, which again, I don't really do in my digital work. I tend to use more of like a cell shading technique, but recently I've been doing more blending and I really enjoy the way that looks. So that's why this piece is the standout piece for me, because it was the first piece I'd done following a lot of the gouache painting that I'd done, and I was really able to use a lot of those techniques in that piece. And I don't really know how to explain it well, but it just kind of unlocked something in my brain that was like, oh, I get it now. So that is why that is my standout piece for now. I'm sure it will change, but for now, that's the one. Okay, the next question I got wasn't really a question. It was kind of just a topic, which was a really, really broad topic. So it's really, really difficult to know what to say, but getting started with digital art. Now, I assume the question is, how do I get started with digital art? Do you have any tips for getting started with digital art? Maybe you're asking, how did I get started with digital art? I'll tell you my story, and then potentially you can take from that maybe some tips and tricks. I don't really know. I got started with digital art way back in like 2012. No, later than that. I'm going to say circa 2015. I'm not entirely sure, but we'll say circa 2015. 10 years ago. Quite honestly, before that, I was a graphic designer. I didn't do it professionally, but that was where my interests lied. That's where I kind of did a lot of hobby stuff. I did do wedding stationery and signage on Etsy. So that is where I kind of got started with not art in the traditional sense, but I was creating things. But it was more of a graphic design type of situation. I wasn't drawing my own stuff. But what happened is a friend of mine gifted me the Wacom tablet that I still use to this day because it has not given up on me. They gifted it to me because they used it when they went to college and they decided to pursue a different career, and it'd just been collecting dust in their attic for however long, and they were like, oh, this might be useful to you. You do a lot of graphic design, maybe here you go. And let me tell you, being able to draw on my computer with a pen was a massive game changer. I didn't use it to its full potential right away. I didn't use it to the extent I use it now, but I did do some designs, I did some drawing, I created greeting cards. I just kind of had a go. Now, I need to preface this with the notion that Photoshop has been my ride or die since I was like 13 years old. I have been using Photoshop for a very, very long time. So I already knew my way around that system. It's not an intuitive system by any means. It is definitely a huge learning curve. But once you're kind of into the Adobe suite and Photoshop, it makes a lot of sense to me, the way my brain works, because I spent a long time learning it. Possibly if I went into Procreate, I wouldn't have a clue what to do, but it's just not the way that I do it. So I realise this is a different path to how a lot of people are going to get into digital drawing. I think a lot of people have an iPad these days, therefore it's fairly reasonable to get an Apple Pencil, download Procreate and start drawing. And honestly, that is my recommendation to you. If you want to get started with digital art, use the tools that you already have, upgrade the tools that you can afford to, and just have a go. If you don't have an iPad, already have a digital drawing program that you're paying for, this advice really doesn't apply. But if you already have an iPad and you can download Procreate on it, I think for like £10, that seems like a good starting point to me. Like, that seems like a reasonably priced starting point. Like, you can't even buy a decent set of paints for £10. So the things you could do on Procreate for £10, if you already have an iPad, you could start with finger drawing. I don't know how easy that's going to be. I think if you already have some form of technology, then to get started with digital drawing probably is not going to set you back as much as you think. And like, let's be honest, like, you can get stuff secondhand. You can get stuff refurbished. I'm a massive advocate for not buying new, because I do just think there is enough crap in the world already. Like, we don't need to be adding to the landfill pool by just getting new all the time. So, I don't know, I'm an advocate for that. I think get supplies or get a setup as reasonably as you can within your budget. Like I said, I already had a laptop. I already had Photoshop for a very, very long time. I had someone gift me a graphics tablet, and that is how I just got started. And I just had a go and did it and used the tools that were available to me. If you have any other like more specific digital art questions, like, leave them below. Maybe I will do another video on that, because this is such a broad topic. I'm kind of like, I don't really know where to go with it. My digital art journey has just been, if anything, it fell in my lap. I don't know, call it what you want, call it divine providence, I have no idea, but it kind of was handed to me on a plate and I just kind of ran with it. So yeah, that's not a helpful answer at all. So leave me some questions for that below. Okay, next question. How do you know when your art style is good enough or considered worthy by others? Honestly, that it will never be. It will never be. There will always be someone who thinks your art is not good enough, not worthy enough, that it is not technical enough, that it is too technical, that it is not in keeping with a nice aesthetic. There will always be someone who doesn't like what you do. And I think you have to just be okay with that in some capacity. I think the more important question to ask when you're asking, how do you know if your art style or your work is good enough to be considered worthy by other people, the better question to ask is this art good enough to be considered worthy by me? And there is some nuance here. I'm not saying it needs to be perfect. I'm not saying that it has to be technically correct. What I'm saying is, do you like it? And that's the long and short of it, as far as I'm concerned. Do I like it? Is this something that appeals to me? Did I enjoy creating it? And I think that also is a massive, massive part of whether your art is good enough. I kind of don't subscribe to that idea of it being good enough, because I just think there are different styles of things, and you can look at some art that is relatively simple, not difficult to create, and yet it is still brilliant. So I think there's this whole, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be technically correct, creating art that is difficult for the sake of it being difficult. I don't buy into that. I don't buy into that idea that it has to be technical or difficult to be good enough. What is good enough for one person is not going to be good enough for another person. And that is where I think you have to shut out all the noise and go inward for this. Like, do I like it? Is it good enough for me? Have I enjoyed creating it? I think those are the more important questions to ask. And whether or not it's worthy, like, what does that even mean? Like I said, there's always going to be someone who doesn't deem your artwork worthy of their, I don't know, time, money, attention. Those people are not the people who are going to enjoy your art. And that's fine. This is where I think art is like a very like deeply personal thing. I think if you are someone who is not super confident with that and you're looking for external validation, kind of think that's where, I think that's the wrong place to go. I really do. I think it has to be something that comes from within you. And I'm not saying this is easy by any means, but I think you have to be able to shut out the noise. I think you have to be able to stop seeking validation for your art elsewhere and just put it out because you love it. I'm not saying you won't ever get validation, because oftentimes you will, but if you put something out because it appealed to you, or because you enjoyed creating it, or because you loved it, there will be some people who don't get it, and that's fine, but there will be people who gravitate towards it, and there will be people where you can get that external validation, but that's secondary. That is not the primary. That cannot be the primary of why you create the art, or where you decide that the art is good enough or not. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like, take, for example, my clay slugs. I love creating those. In fact, I just created a new batch yesterday for Christmas, which I'm super excited about. I love them. I think they look great. They're funny to me. I find that funny, that they're these little cute slugs. Like, slugs inherently are a bit gross. They're kind of ugly and they're kind of slimy, and people think they're disgusting. And I wanted to turn that on its head, and I have successfully done that. So for me, that is a win, and that is worthy. Will everybody want a little clay slug sitting on their desk? No, because although I think they're adorable and I love them and they are cute to look at, there are going to be some people that still inherently feel, ew, slug, gross. And that's not for them, and that's fine. Like, I'm okay with that because I love them. I love them so much. And the people that have bought the slugs from me, those are the people who get it, who understand, who are enjoying and appreciating and validating my work. But, like I said, that is secondary for me. The primary is, did I enjoy creating this? And do I like the final piece? Because those two things also are intrinsically linked as far as I'm concerned. There are certain things that I've created that I have loved the outcome of, but hated the process. And therefore, I don't want to create those things again. Doesn't mean it's not a worthy piece of art, but it just informs me of what I enjoy doing. And for me, that's a massive part of it. There's no point in creating art for the sake of art if you're not enjoying it. And I think that's where the line blurs between being an artist and being a small business. And for me, those two things currently are really, really blurry. And I'm trying to lean more towards being an artist and less towards being a small business. But truth be told, we've got to make a living somehow. So I'm kind of towing that line. I'm still finding my way. But I have done things in the past that I have hated doing. Again, the slugs. I really wanted them to have this absolutely glass-like, shiny exterior. I wanted them to have like a proper ceramic glazed look. The only way I was going to achieve that was with UV resin. I did it once. I hated it. I hate working with UV resin. It's horrible. It's smelly. It's sticky. I didn't enjoy it. There was not one thing about that I enjoyed. But if I had continued with that path because I felt it was the right thing to do, or it was what I could see other people doing and maybe I should do that too, I would not enjoy that art anymore. And I would just not create them anymore. And that, to me, feels really sad. So I think also what's part of this is you have to enjoy what you're doing. It's so personal. It's so personal that you have to really enjoy what you're doing. You have to enjoy what you're putting out and ignore the rest, I think. Wow, that went deep. That one, I feel we bordered on like some kind of spiritual awakening there, I'm sure. Okay, what Procreate brushes do I use and how do I decide on composition? As I already said, not a Procreate user. I am a Photoshop user. I wouldn't know where to start with Procreate. I have toyed with the idea of getting an iPad and an Apple Pencil, but realistically, I'm kind of like, that's not something that's super accessible to me right now. If I already had an iPad, I would consider it more seriously. But I'm kind of like, it's not something that's super accessible to me right now. So maybe at some point I'll go down that route, because I really do like the idea of not having to sit at a desk. But equally, I'm a Photoshop user, have been for a really, really long time. I will say the kind of style of brushes that I like to use are kind of gritty with some amount of texture in them. I kind of like them to emulate traditional media in that way with the texture that they can produce. And what I've really done is I've just kind of adapted some of the standard brushes that you can... Actually, they're not even the standard brushes for Photoshop. They are... I think they're like additional add-on ones, but they come from Adobe and they're kind of free when you get the Creative Suite. If you have the entire Creative Suite, you've got access to like some extra brushes for free. So I've used ones from like the Dry Media pack, which has got like pencils, charcoal, that kind of thing in it. I've also got some gouache brushes on there. But what I've really done is I've kind of taken the brushes that I like and I've just adapted them to my needs. So there's like a standard pencil, I think, and I've adapted that into 3 different brushes for me. One is like a sketching brush, one is a colouring pencil, and one is a line art pencil. The line art I kind of have like a smoothing effect on, so it gives a little bit more stability, which makes it feel more like a paintbrush actually. The way that it moves is kind of slower, as if it were like a liner brush, but it has this nice gritty pencil texture. Bear with me a minute, I've got pins and needles and it hurts so much. I can't move. I swear this is not normal for pins and needles to hurt this much. I'm sure when other people get pins and needles, it is not this painful. I need to get up. I've been sitting on my foot like an absolute idiot. Like, historically, I just have really bad circulation anyway, but when I get pins and needles, I cannot explain to you the pain. The pain of it is so bad. It's starting to subside now. I swear this is not normal for pins and needles. I should probably see a doctor about this, but that's another thing to add to my never-ending to-do list. What was I even saying before that happened? Jeez, I have no idea. Brushes, right. So, yes, I tend to use, like, gritty texture brushes. That's kind of what I like. I also like to put like a watercolor paper effect on the artwork once it's finished. So yeah, anything that really brings out a gritty paper-like texture, I really, really love. Obviously not the same for everybody, because there are some artists who really love to use some like really smooth digital brushes that are just like no texture, nothing. They look more like digital art. I like to kind of try and toe the line between like digital art but traditional looking. And the other half of the question about composition, quite honestly, I am winging it. I'm not going to lie to you. I know some of the like theory, like I know the rule of thirds. I know that there are like different types of composition. That's like there's a swirl one and there's like an S-shaped one. Honestly, I get in my head so much about theory and technicality that I confuse myself more. If I try and do it properly, I find it so confusing. I'm just like, I don't even know if this is a good piece of art anymore. So quite honestly, I'm just winging it on composition. I really am. In that same vein, I found colour theory to be incredibly confusing. When I'm like looking at the theory for colour theory, I'm like, I don't understand it. I don't understand it at all. I actually do understand it. I just don't understand it when it's explained to me in this kind of academic, kind of theoretic way. I understand colour theory. I understand how to mix paint colours. I understand the colour wheel and opposites. And I just, there's some kind of disconnect in my brain with that as information and that as artwork. Like, I feel like I do know the opposites. I know that if I'm mixing paint colours, which like for digital media doesn't apply quite so much, you just pick a colour, right? You don't have to mix colours. Like if I'm mixing paint, I feel like I don't understand the theory. I feel like I don't understand how colour theory applies to mixing paint, but I can mix paint, right? I can look at a colour and go, that's too warm, okay, I need to cool it down. I can look at a colour and go, that's got too much red in it, okay, I need to even that out, we'll add some green. Like, I understand those principles, but for some reason, they're really disconnected in my brain between the theory and the doing of the artwork. I feel like the doing of the artwork is instinctive to me. Therefore, the theory, I somehow find confusing. And I wonder if that's the same with composition. I've never really looked into it too much because I kind of look at composition theory and go, I don't really know. I'm just going to leave that alone. So yeah, I feel like I'm just winging it. If I'm getting it right, it's not on purpose. If I'm getting it right, it's just somewhat instinctive to me. I do feel I have a good eye for things. I do feel I have a good eye for what looks nice. But again, that's just because like I will look at something and go, oh, that looks nice. How do I explain this in the way that I mean? I guess sometimes for like setting up my camera as well, like I get shots for video and stuff that I'm like, I'm not deliberately trying to make this look nice. It's just caught my eye and I've gone, oh, that looks nice. I'm gonna video that in the same way that my eyes saw it. As much as you can go and learn the theory, which quite honestly, like I say, I'm winging it. I could do more theory, but as much as you can go and learn the theory, I do also feel like sometimes just slowing down and taking stock of what's around you and just noticing the little things really helps with that. Like, if you can take a decent photograph of something because it's something you've seen and it looked nice, and you can be like, okay, well, where was my eye when I saw this? How do I replicate that in a camera? I think now I'm thinking about these things, like, there is obviously some process there, but if I feel like it happens so fast in my brain, I'm like, oh, that looks nice. Oh, yeah, I'm going to take a picture of that. There's obviously more to that thought process, but it's happening, like, unconsciously, I guess. So, yeah, don't take advice from me on composition because I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. So, how do you narrow down the illustrations for your collections? Okay, so I was about to say something really contradictory. I was about to say I'm a one idea at a time girly. I'm not. I'm a million ideas at a time girly, but I am one execution at a time girly. I have a million ideas a minute, I swear. And I used to write them down. I really did. I used to write down every single idea that came to me. And what would happen was that I would have a list of ideas so long that it was so overwhelming I could never pick anything. That I would just look at this list and be like, how do I know which of these ideas is the right idea? The right idea, as if there is one right idea. So this is going to be like counterintuitive, the opposite of any advice you have ever heard in your life, I'm sure. What I decided to stop doing was making that list because it just gave me decision paralysis. Like, I would write down every single idea and then not know what to do because I was so overwhelmed. I used to write down every single idea because I was afraid of forgetting them, because ideas come to me and they go. They come and they go. It's constant. It is a constant in my life that I will look at something and go, that's a good idea. And it will leave me and I will have another one. And I kind of thought, that's not as big of a problem as I think it is. Because yes, ideas come at me constantly and they also leave me constantly. But that's fine, because if one idea leaves me, another will come. And I kind of follow the ideas that feel good to me. And again, I think this is where artwork is very, very internal. And you have to follow what lights you up, what brings you joy. I feel like if you do that, it shows. And if you don't do that, it also shows. So what I tend to do is I tend to run with an idea. And these will be silly ideas. These will be ideas that come to me in the middle of the night. They will be ideas that probably don't even make sense to anyone else. Like, for example, the latest goodie box that I'm working on is a circus theme goodie box. But this is a popcorn circus. The circus is made from an upside down popcorn bucket. Like, if you turn this up this way, it's quite clearly a popcorn bucket, but it's upside down and it's a circus. This idea came to me and I just ran with it. And what I tend to do is create one big illustration, and then from that take lots of little things. Now, I'm going to say that for this one, actually, I've done it slightly differently. I took the main idea, popcorn and circus, and I've kind of done this one backwards. But I will say it's not always the way I do it. When I answered this question on Instagram, what I actually said was I would do like a big illustration first, and then from there we kind of take elements of that and turn them into stickers and whatever else. But actually, the more I think about it, the more that's not true. What tends to happen is I create a sticker sheet. More often than not, I'll create a sticker sheet first. And what that sticker sheet really is just a sketchbook page. That is what that is, essentially, for me. It's a sketchbooking exercise. So, I will give you an example. And you know what? I'm going to use the same circus theme just because I just showed you that, and it's probably the best example for me to give because it will make sense. So, what I actually started with was these little popcorn sketches. Essentially, this was just a little sketchbook exercise, and I actually did do it in a sketchbook, but then I wanted to do a digital version, so I essentially just drew a bunch of little popcorn pieces, and that is product one, made and done. Then from there, obviously, I knew I wanted to create the circus bucket, popcorn bucket circus as well. And then following that same theme, if this is a circus, what would you have in a circus, and what would you have in a circus of that size, I guess. So we then have like a little frog, and he's inside the circus doing his little tricks, except he's not. The ghosts are doing the tricks for him, but he doesn't know that. He thinks he can really juggle, but he actually can't. So yeah, in terms of narrowing down ideas, I kind of just take one idea and run with it. In this case, it was just popcorn. It just started out with popcorn, and that was a fleeting moment. It was actually a fleeting moment when I was on holiday in Spain, just sitting by the pool with my sketchbook and a pencil, and I was just drawing little pieces of popcorn, and I was like, popcorn. Where can I go with this? Like, the circus is where I consider popcorn to be like a prevalent thing. And then from there, I was kind of like, well, what if the popcorn pieces were the clowns at the circus, or they were the workers at the circus? Like, how would that work? What would they look like? And actually, I have done another sticker sheet of these with little clown faces on, which is what's going to go in this goodie box. So yeah, in terms of narrowing down ideas, I really don't narrow down ideas, because I don't allow myself to bank ideas up. And like I said, that is probably counterintuitive to any advice you've ever heard ever, because I know so many people that are like, oh, I've had an idea, I need to write it down before I forget. And I kind of just don't do that anymore, because it would just lead to decision paralysis, or I would end up with a list so long that I would just throw it away. So then I'm kind of like, why am I wasting my time writing these things down if I'm just going to throw them away and not be able to execute them anyway? So I kind of just have to trust that I will have enough ideas. Again, that's like an internal thing, that's like really personal, but I kind of just had to be okay with the idea that not every idea needs to be worked on. Some ideas are just fleeting moments and then they go again. Other ideas they stick, and the ones that just stick in my mind are the ones that I'm like, I know I want to work on this. I am, like I said, a million ideas a minute kind of person, and there are so many things that I could create. But I think if I followed every single idea that came into my head, I'd never be able to do it all. I never would. And I would not enjoy doing that either. So I think that sometimes, whether or not this is going to resonate, I don't know, but I think because I've done a lot of work getting over anxiety, and I've done a lot of kind of like internal work in terms of, what's the word? There's a word for this. I can't remember what the word is, but I've done a lot of this type of work for myself. And one thing that came across when really trying to get over a lot of anxiety was not every thought that comes into your head is true. You might look at your art and be like, this isn't good enough. That's a thought. It's not necessarily a fact. So not every thought is a fact. And I kind of think in the same vein, not every idea that I have is the right idea. And again, like, I feel like I'm kind of doing this intuitively. It's not, I don't have a system for this. There's no system. There's no how do I narrow down my ideas. I just kind of run with the ones that light me up. And that is the fluffiest answer ever, and not at all helpful, I realise. Like I said, don't come to me for art advice, because I have no idea what I'm doing. A lot of this just boils down to like art practice being super internal, super personal, and you have to have some amount of self-belief to be confident with that. And I think, I do think that shows. I do think that shows often. But it's, in that same vein, it's making it really difficult for me to explain how to do something, because how I do something and how you can do something is not the same. So I think that is a huge part of doing art, is being brave enough to lean into yourself and not necessarily follow trends. Or I'm not saying don't follow trends ever, because actually sometimes you see other people doing things, you're like, I want to have a go at that too. That's fine. I think you can't make your art practice heavily reliant on that. I think it has to come from within somewhere. And that applies to the way that you work, the way that you show your work, or how you decide to show your work, or whether you decide to show your work. I think that also comes down to the ideas you decide to follow and the pieces that you choose to create. I think it's all very internal. It's all very personal. Yeah, like I said, that's probably the fluffiest answer ever, but I feel like that's not helpful. I feel like it's not helpful, but it's the God's honest truth. I can't sit here and be like, well, step one would be this and step one would be that, because honestly, I just don't think that's the way it works. And I think all too often we are trying to overanalyze and intellectualize something that is just intrinsic. I honestly think that, like, if you are artistic, it is in you. You can't be any other way. You just don't know how to be any other way. Again, I don't know where I saw this. It was some quote or meme or something that I'd seen somewhere. That was, and I'm paraphrasing massively because I can't remember what the actual wording was, but it was basically like, why do we believe that humans have to be good at something for it to be worthy? And they were comparing humans to birds in this sense. Like, birds just sing. They just do. They just sing and they make their noises, not because they think they're good at it, but it's just intrinsically in them to do that. And why do we not view humans as the same? Why do we not view ourselves as, you can sing whether you're good at it or not? You can just do that because it's part of the human experience. We kind of have this idea that you have to be good at something for it to be valuable. But I don't think that. I think if you want to dance and sing because that's something that's in you, just do it. And I think the same about the art. Like, why do we feel that we have to be good at something or good enough at something for it to be worthwhile? Because actually, why can we not just accept that art is like intrinsically in us? Humans have been creating things since the dawn of time, hence cave paintings, you know? Like, we have been doing this for a really, really long time, and we have overanalyzed and intellectualized it to the point that we're afraid to do it unless we're going to do it perfectly. And I don't buy into that at all. And as far as I'm concerned, neither should you. Maybe that is the one takeaway from this entire video. I don't know. But on that note, I'm going to leave it here. Let me know if you've enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any more questions for me. Leave them in the comments, especially digital art questions, because maybe I can like do another video on that at some point if that is something you're interested in. But I'm going to leave it here, pals, for now. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you next time.